do you think happens when we die?
I know that the ones who love us will miss us.
Keanu Reeves has captured the world's heart for decades with his legendary roles, his acts of kindness, and his quiet, almost mysterious life off-screen. But when it comes to love and marriage, his story has taken a very different path. Now, at 60, Keanu is finally opening up about why he's chosen to live without ever walking down the aisle. Join us as we explore the truth behind Keanu's decision. Abandoned and alone. Keanu Charles Reeves was born on September 2, 1964, in Beirut, Lebanon. His early years were marked by turbulence and absence, setting the tone for the quiet, private man he would one day become. His father, Samuel Nolan Reeves Jr., left the family when Keanu was just 3 years old. The absence left a permanent hole in his childhood, and his relationship with his father never truly recovered. The last time Keanu saw him was during a brief visit to the Hawaiian island of Kauai when Keanu was 13. It was not the warm reunion a child hopes for, but instead a short and uneasy meeting that left him with more questions than closure. After the divorce, Keanu's mother, Patricia, took on the role of holding the family together. Patricia was a costume designer who often moved for work and relationships. This meant Keanu's childhood was filled with constant changes. First, they lived in Sydney, Australia, then New York City, and finally Toronto, Canada, where Keanu spent most of his formative years. Patricia remarried more than once, each relationship adding to the feeling of instability. One of those marriages, to director Paul Aaron, was brief, but Aaron remained in Keanu's life as a mentor. He introduced him to the world of theater, helping the young man land one of his very first stage jobs at the Hedgerow Theater in Pennsylvania. Even though his home life was unsettled, this early connection planted the first seeds of Keanu's passion for acting. Life in Toronto was not easy for him. Keanu struggled in school, especially because he was diagnosed with dyslexia. Reading and traditional learning were a challenge, and as a result, he moved between several schools. He attended 4 different high schools, each move making it harder to form lasting friendships. One of those schools, the Etobicoke School of the Arts, expelled him because he was considered too energetic and disruptive. Teachers and classmates often misunderstood him. Despite these struggles, he wasn't bitter. He was simply quiet, reserved, and private. Even as a child, Keanu kept to himself and built an inner world that gave him comfort when the outer one felt unstable. For a time, hockey was his true escape. Keanu was a skilled goalie with quick reflexes and a sharp mind for the game. He loved it so much that he dreamed of playing professionally, even hoping to one day represent Canada on the Olympic team. On the ice, he felt focused and alive in a way that was rare for him in school. But when an injury ended his chances of pursuing hockey at a higher level, Keanu was forced to let go of the dream. It was a crushing moment, but it also became the push that made him look for another path. Slowly, his attention turned toward acting, which had already been planted in him through Paul Aaron's influence. By the time he was 15, Keanu knew that acting was what he wanted to do. He briefly attended an alternative school that allowed students to work while studying, but academics continued to be a struggle, and he eventually dropped out at 17. With a strong will and little to fall back on, he decided to fully pursue his dream of becoming an actor. At 20, with the help of his stepfather, he obtained a green card and moved to Los Angeles to begin his career in Hollywood. Even as he entered the acting world, Keanu faced challenges with his identity. Many agents told him that his first name, Keanu, which means cool breeze over the mountains in Hawaiian, sounded too unusual and too ethnic for Hollywood. To make things easier, he briefly auditioned under the name Casey Reeves. However, it never felt right, and he soon returned to using his real name, refusing to hide who he was. His first steps into acting came through small jobs. He worked as a correspondent on a Canadian youth television program called Going Great and appeared in commercials, including one for Coca-Cola. He then earned roles in Canadian television series like Hanging In and found work in stage productions such as Romeo and Juliet and Wolf Boy. These early experiences gave him confidence, showing that he could bring depth and emotion to his roles, even when the audience was small. The young man who had once struggled to find his place now knew exactly where he wanted to be, on stage, and in front of the camera. What had started as a way to cope with instability and disappointment had become his lifelong calling. And as Keanu chased his dream, the world had no idea just how far that calling would take him. Hollow price of fame. When Keanu Reeves first arrived in Hollywood, he was young, determined, and ready to take on any role that came his way. His early career reflected both his natural talent and his willingness to try different characters. One of his first noticeable roles came in Youngblood, where he played a hockey goalie. It was a small part, but it was meaningful, because hockey had once been such a big part of his life. The role allowed him to connect with something personal, and although it was not a major breakthrough, it gave him visibility and experience in front of a larger audience. That same year, Keanu landed a role in River's Edge. The film was based on a disturbing true story, and it gave him a chance to show a different side of his acting. Critics immediately noticed his performance, describing it as thoughtful and layered. He wasn't just a young actor playing small parts anymore. He had shown that he could handle emotionally complex material. River's Edge earned him respect in the industry and marked the beginning of his reputation as an actor who could carry serious roles. In 1989, Keanu became a household name thanks to Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Playing Ted Theodore Logan, the goofy and lovable half of the time-traveling duo, Keanu captured the hearts of audiences everywhere. The film was a pop culture phenomenon, turning him into a recognizable face almost overnight. The lighthearted comedy was fun, but it also came with risks. Many people began to see Keanu as the airhead character he played on screen, and he worried about being typecast. Still, Bill and Ted gave him the kind of fame that many actors spend years chasing. Despite the comedic success, Keanu wanted to prove that he was more than just the funny, clueless teenager audiences loved. In 1991, he did exactly that with My Own Private Idaho. The film paired him with his close friend River Phoenix, and together they delivered haunting emotional performances. Keanu played Scott Favor, a privileged young man drifting through life, and his work in the film revealed his ability to dig into deep, vulnerable emotions. The role showed critics and audiences that Keanu had range and was serious about his craft. At the same time, working alongside River strengthened their bond. Off-screen, the two developed a profound friendship that went beyond the Hollywood spotlight. For Keanu, this connection deepened his naturally quiet and introspective nature. He valued relationships built on honesty and trust rather than fame, and River was one of the few people who truly understood him. By the late 1990s, Keanu's career reached an entirely new level with The Matrix. Cast as Neo, a computer hacker who discovers the truth about his reality, Keanu took on a role that demanded both physical dedication and emotional intensity. He trained for months in martial arts and fight choreography, determined to perform as much of the action as possible himself. His commitment paid off. The Matrix wasn't just a hit, it changed action movies forever. With its groundbreaking special effects, unique story, and stylish fight scenes, the film became a global phenomenon. The role of Neo made Keanu one of the most recognizable stars in the world. Suddenly, his face was everywhere, and his name was linked to one of the biggest franchises in cinema. Yet even with this level of fame, Keanu remained distant from the Hollywood spotlight. He avoided scandals, rarely spoke about his private life, and often appeared modest in interviews. While his career was exploding, he still carried himself with the same quietness that had defined him since childhood. The world saw Keanu Reeves as a rising star, but behind that calm exterior, his personal life was far more complicated. And just as his fame grew brighter, tragedy was waiting to strike in ways that would change him forever. The tragedy of River Phoenix. In 1990, Keanu Reeves met River Phoenix on the set of the comedy I Love You to Death. At the time, both were young actors rising quickly in Hollywood. River was already considered one of the most talented performers of his generation, while Keanu was building his reputation as both a comedic and serious actor. Their connection was almost immediate. Unlike many Hollywood friendships built on publicity or convenience, theirs was rooted in genuine respect and understanding. Keanu and River shared more than a job, they shared a way of looking at life. Both came from unconventional backgrounds and had found themselves thrust into the entertainment industry at a young age. They enjoyed simple things together, like riding motorcycles, staying up late talking, and spending time away from cameras. They treated each other like brothers, laughing freely and leaning on each other in ways that only close friends can. For Keanu, who had always been private and guarded, River was someone who could see beyond the surface and understand his silences. When Keanu discovered the script for My Own Private Idaho, he knew it was something special. Instead of sending it through agents, he decided to deliver it directly to River himself. He rode nearly 1,000 miles on his motorcycle just to place the script in his friend's hands. That act showed how much Keanu valued River and how deeply he wanted them to share the project. The film became a defining moment for both of them. River played a young hustler struggling with personal battles, while Keanu portrayed his wealthy but restless companion. Their performances were raw and fearless, and the movie quickly gained critical praise. More importantly, it captured their real-life bond on screen in a way audiences could feel. But while Keanu was finding his place in Hollywood, River was struggling behind the scenes. The pressure of fame weighed heavily on him. He was sensitive, thoughtful, and carried the expectations of being labeled the next great actor of his generation. Unfortunately, Hollywood at the time also made it easy for young stars to fall into dangerous habits. River began using drugs, and while those close to him worried, the depth of his struggles was often hidden behind his talent and charm. On Halloween night in 1993, tragedy struck. River collapsed outside the Viper Room, a club in Los Angeles partly owned by Johnny Depp. He was only 23 years old. The cause was a fatal mix of drugs, and the news shocked not just Hollywood, but the world. For Keanu, the loss was devastating. At the time, he was in the middle of filming Speed, the movie that would later catapult him into global stardom. Outwardly, he continued working, showing up to set and doing his job. But inside, he was broken. River wasn't just a colleague. He was one of the few people Keanu had truly let into his world. Losing him left a wound that never fully healed. In the years that followed, Keanu rarely spoke about River publicly. He chose to keep his grief private, protecting his memories rather than sharing them with the world. This silence was not out of coldness, but from the depth of his pain. Friends and co-stars noticed a change in him. He became more reserved, more careful about who he allowed into his life. While he had always been quiet, after River's death, he seemed to carry an extra weight, a distance that never quite left him. The tragedy shaped the way Keanu moved through the world. It reinforced his tendency to keep his emotions guarded and to avoid the loud, often invasive culture of Hollywood. His grief turned inward, becoming part of who he was rather than something he spoke about openly. River's loss was one of the earliest and most painful reminders for Keanu that life could take away the people he loved most without warning. And just when it seemed like the pain couldn't grow heavier, another heartbreaking loss was waiting for him a few years later: love and tragedy. By the late 1990s, Keanu Reeves was known worldwide as a successful actor, but behind the fame, he lived a very quiet personal life. That changed in 1998 when he met Jennifer Syme. Their introduction came through director David Lynch's circle of friends, and almost immediately there was a spark between them. Jennifer was working in Hollywood as an assistant to Lynch, but she was also carving her own path in the industry. For Keanu, who had spent years keeping people at a distance after the loss of River Phoenix, this was one of the rare times he let someone into his private world. Their connection was fast and genuine. Friends of the couple later said that Keanu seemed lighter when he was with Jennifer. He trusted her, and she gave him a sense of hope that he hadn't felt in years. They shared a dream of building a family together, something Keanu had quietly longed for, but never truly allowed himself to imagine. For the first time in a long while, it looked like his life might finally open into something more personal and permanent, far away from the chaos of film sets and Hollywood attention. That hope grew even stronger when Jennifer became pregnant. Keanu and Jennifer were expecting a daughter, and the anticipation of starting a family brought joy into their lives. They named her Ava Archer Syme Reeves, but happiness quickly turned to heartbreak. On Christmas Eve of 1999, Jennifer went into early labor, and their daughter was stillborn. The loss devastated both of them. What had been a season of excitement suddenly turned into one of unbearable grief. The tragedy placed an enormous strain on their relationship. Keanu dealt with his pain the only way he knew how, by working. He buried himself in films and press tours, keeping his emotions mostly hidden from the outside world. Jennifer struggled more openly. She sought relief in distractions, parties, and late nights, trying to escape the grief that weighed her down. Although they still cared for one another deeply, the weight of their loss pulled them apart. Over time, their romantic relationship ended, but Keanu remained close to her. He checked in on her, made time to see her, and made sure she knew that she was not alone. Then, in April 2001, another tragedy struck. Jennifer attended a party in Los Angeles, and afterward, she drove home in her Jeep. On the way, she lost control of the car, collided with parked vehicles, and was killed instantly. She was only 28 years old. For Keanu, the news was almost impossible to process. Within the span of just 2 years, the double loss left Keanu shattered. It wasn't only grief, it was a sense that an entire future had been stolen from him. The dream of having a family, of raising a child, of building a life with a partner had vanished completely. Friends have said that this was the point where Keanu closed himself off even further. The pain was too great, and he could not bring himself to imagine marriage or family life again. For him, love had become inseparable from loss, and the risks felt too heavy to take. From then on, Keanu's reluctance toward marriage wasn't about avoiding commitment. It was about protecting himself from the possibility of another unbearable heartbreak. But even with all this sorrow, his story didn't end in darkness, because years later, something unexpected brought him a new kind of companionship. Unexpected rebirth in John Wick. By the early 2000s, Keanu Reeves had already starred in some of the most memorable films of his generation. From Bill and Ted to The Matrix, he had proven himself as both a cultural icon and a respected actor. But after the enormous success of the Matrix trilogy, his career entered a quieter and more difficult period. One of the early challenges came with The Watcher, a psychological thriller in which Keanu played a serial killer. Reports later surfaced that he had been pressured into the project and wasn't fully committed to it. While the film made money, critics dismissed it, and audiences were left confused by his casting. It wasn't the kind of role that expanded his career. Instead, it raised questions about his choices. Over the next decade, Keanu's projects received mixed reactions. He directed and starred in Man of Tai Chi, a martial arts film that reflected his genuine respect for the genre. While it was praised for its fight choreography, the movie struggled to find a wide audience. Around the same time, he starred in 47 Ronin, a big-budget fantasy epic. The film cost nearly $175 million to make, but performed poorly at the box office, marking one of the biggest flops of his career. By the early 2010s, Hollywood seemed to view Keanu as a has-been. He was no longer the young action star, and he wasn't getting many leading roles in major studio films. Interviews from that time showed him maintaining his humility, but behind the scenes, he was facing a real challenge: how to stay relevant in an industry that constantly looks for the next big name. That reinvention came from an unexpected script titled Scorn, which later became John Wick. Interestingly, the role wasn't even written for someone like Keanu. The original version of the character was a 75-year-old retired hitman seeking revenge. When the script came to Keanu, he saw potential in reshaping it. Instead of an elderly assassin, he envisioned a man in his 50s, someone who had walked away from a violent life but was pulled back into it after losing the one thing that gave his life meaning. Keanu poured himself into the role. He suggested changes that transformed the character into John Wick as we know him, a grieving widower who loses his wife, only to have his last gift from her, a puppy, taken from him by ruthless criminals. That grief-driven motivation connected deeply with Keanu's own experiences of loss. He knew what it meant to carry pain and to move through life with a broken heart. That emotional authenticity became the soul of the film. Released in 2014, John Wick was a surprise hit. Audiences connected with its simple yet powerful story, its beautifully choreographed action, and Keanu's performance, which felt both raw and precise. Critics praised him for bringing depth to a genre that often focuses only on spectacle. What started as a modestly budgeted action film quickly grew into a global phenomenon. Sequels followed, each expanding the world of John Wick and further cementing Keanu's place back in the spotlight. For Keanu, John Wick wasn't just a comeback. It was proof that even after setbacks, he could reinvent himself in a way that felt honest and powerful. The role restored his career, and introduced him to a new generation of fans who saw him as both a legendary action star and a deeply human performer. And as his career soared again, something unexpected was also happening in his personal life. Quietly, love was finding its way back in. Acts of kindness. Keanu Reeves may have chosen not to marry or build a traditional family, but that doesn't mean he stopped believing in love. Instead, he found other ways to express it, through kindness, generosity, and quiet acts of compassion. Over the years, his choices have shown that love is not only about romance or family life. For Keanu, it can be something broader, shared with friends, strangers, and the people who cross his path. One of the clearest examples of Keanu's way of giving is the way he treats the people he works with. During the Matrix sequels, when the films became massive financial successes, Keanu chose to share much of his earnings with the behind-the-scenes teams. Reports suggest he gave away tens of millions of dollars to the special effects crew and costume designers, recognizing that they were just as responsible for the film's success as the actors. For many of them, his gesture wasn't only about money, it was about being seen and respected in an industry where their hard work often goes unnoticed. Keanu has also taken pay cuts to allow certain films to move forward with the right talent. For example, he reduced his own salary so that Gene Hackman could join him in The Replacements and Al Pacino could be cast in The Devil's Advocate. These decisions weren't about him earning less, they were about ensuring the project had the strongest possible cast. For Keanu, collaboration and fairness mattered more than his own paycheck. Outside of Hollywood, Keanu is known for small but powerful acts of kindness in everyday life. He has been seen sitting with a homeless man on the street, sharing food and having a real conversation instead of just walking past. Passengers have spoken about how he helped strangers on delayed flights, organizing transportation when schedules fell apart, and making sure everyone reached their destination safely. Others have described meeting him at airports or on the roadside where he patiently signed autographs, chatted, or simply showed respect without any sense of ego. These stories are consistent and widespread, painting a picture of a man who doesn't put himself above others, even though he could easily hide behind his fame. Keanu's kindness in these ordinary moments shows that his understanding of love extends to everyone, not just those closest to him. Beyond the gestures that people see, Keanu has also committed himself to giving in ways that remain largely private. He quietly runs a foundation dedicated to supporting children's hospitals and funding cancer research. This mission is deeply personal, inspired by his sister Kim's long battle with leukemia. Instead of attaching his name to the foundation for publicity, Keanu chose to keep it low profile. He has said he prefers that the focus remain on the cause, not on him. Taken together, these choices reveal something important about how Keanu sees love. For him, love doesn't need to be confined to marriage or a traditional family. It can be expressed through generosity, through kindness to strangers, and through supporting causes that matter. His life demonstrates that family can also mean community, the crews he works with, the people he helps on the street, or the children his foundation supports. Keanu's philosophy is simple. Love is real, but it doesn't have to follow the rules society expects. Marriage off the table. The tragedies Keanu Reeves experienced in the late 1990s and early 2000s left a lasting mark on his life. Losing both his daughter and Jennifer Syme within such a short time made him reevaluate what he wanted from relationships, family, and even life itself. In the years that followed, it became clear that Keanu chose solitude as his way of coping. After Jennifer's death, Keanu withdrew even more from the Hollywood spotlight. While he continued acting, he avoided the social scenes and red carpets that many stars embraced. Instead, he focused his energy on work itself, taking on roles that interested him without worrying about image or publicity. When he wasn't filming, he often spent his time away from cameras, finding comfort in activities that gave him peace. In interviews, Keanu sometimes referred to himself as the lonely guy. He didn't say it with bitterness or self-pity, but with a kind of acceptance. He knew his life had taken a path that was very different from what he once imagined, and he recognized the isolation that came with it. For fans, hearing him describe himself this way only deepened the sense that he was someone who had been shaped by tragedy, but still carried himself with honesty. The idea of marriage, once a natural part of his dream of family life, became something Keanu no longer considered. The pain of burying a child and then losing a partner made the concept of permanence feel fragile to him. For most people, marriage represents security and a promise of a shared future. But for Keanu, the experiences of his past made that promise seem unsafe. Even though he decided marriage was not for him, Keanu never shut himself off from love entirely. Over the years, he spoke about the value of connection, honesty, and kindness. He showed through his actions, both on and off screen, that he understood love as something larger than a label or a ceremony. To him, marriage was a chapter that had passed him by, but love itself had not. He believed that relationships could be real and meaningful without the need for a wedding or official recognition. What mattered most was trust, respect, and companionship. In this way, Keanu found his own philosophy. Love is not defined by marriage, and life can still be full of connection without it. By living this way, Keanu created a balance that worked for him. He was able to protect himself from the risks of loss while still leaving room for relationships built on shared values and quiet understanding. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next story.